Hello, everyone. My name is Henry Nicholas Robertson. I'll be the presenter for tonight. I am a member of the Ottawa Field Naturalist Clubs, and I'm also a member of the Alliance Parc des Deschênes. So we are a nonprofit. We're dedicated to trying to turn some lands that are around the Deschênes neighborhood in Aylmer sector Gatineau, some lands that are currently owned by the city of Gatineau, by the Ministry of Transport Quebec, as well as by Hydro Quebec, into some parkland, because there's a really amazing ecosystem that's found there. And today I will be showing you kind of some of the, largely a lot of the botany, but I've ventured beyond that and tried to include a lot of the fauna as well that you can see in the park. And yeah, I will start the presentation, as well as some fungi. I got a few photos of there. I was really lucky to be able to go with the Outaouais Mycologist Association. I've probably butchered their name, but with Yolanda Dalpe there, she showed me some amazing discoveries while we were all working to save this forest. All righty. So just start from the beginning here. So as I said, this will be sort of a virtual tour of the proposed Parc des Deschênes, based on a lot of the sites that I've seen just walking around, particularly in the parcel that was listed for sale this summer. So to give you some background, the area of the proposed park is it's about 100 acres surrounding Deschênes in Aylmer sector Gatineau. This terrain in red here, I'm getting ahead of myself. In 2012 and further revised in 2016, the Club des Ornithologues de l'Outaouais, COO, inventoried the area as part of a citizen science project. The resulting report, they have this big, beautiful report on the area. It's like 300 pages where they kind of make it into different zones, you know, the herbaceous rocky zones, the forest, the wetlands, etc. And they inventoried over 800 different species there, which is really cool. They further updated this in 2016. And because of that, they put signs around the park saying that, hey, so many species are found here. Keep your dog on a leash, you know, stuff like that. But in April 2020, this red parcel of land was put up for sale by the city. A city councilor proposed it to finance a hockey rink in the Plateau district. Now, this area in particular has a lot of oak forest. And the area is Deschênes, which means of the oak. The new district that just got announced in Gatineau that has an Algonquin Anishinaabemowin name, Mitigoning, which I really should have included here, but that means place of oaks. So the name Deschênes, the association with, you know, Lac Deschênes, the oaks here, has gone back a really long time, and it's really the namesake of the community. Well, because of this last portion of namesake oak forest in Gatineau, in the Deschênes area was being put up for sale, the community really rallied together. A Facebook group was started. If you go to the Protect the Deschênes Forest, you know, there's thousands of members there. We managed to get around 500 people out to a protest, all keeping our social distancing and everyone wearing masks and all that. But here it was being reported on in July. Those efforts were ultimately successful, and we were able to halt the sale there. So here's just a little outline of what the area, sorry, I'm just putting myself on a timer here. I forgot to do that earlier, or else I'll just keep ranting about the same thing. Here we got the area of the proposed park. You see over here on the west, this is the area that was kind of for sale. This is a lot of oak forest here. Then we have a big wetland complex. You often see this listed on Google Maps as Parc Guillotte. On city maps, it's listed as Parc Riveraine. I think it's been designated for a little while. Here you got the Voyager pathway, which is some great bike trails. For many of you who've been in this area, you've noticed a lot of the hickories. This area is known as Pointe des Carriers, so Hickory Point, where the shagbark hickory population is. This is also an old portage route, the Portage du Haut, the High Portage, or le Troisième Portage de Chaudière. Here you got the Ruins Rapids, the infamous rapids that kayakers go over still and use it to do incredible tricks. Here you got Ile Conroy, This island's really remarkable for nesting birds in particular. A lot of ground nesting birds that nest by the rapid site there. As well as over here, kind of at the end of the park, you got Marais Gruel, which is kind of a seasonal wetland there that dries out often in summer. It has a lot of really beautiful habitat for damselflies and dragonflies and all sorts of different wetland creatures. So why is this site so special? Well, just to give you one example, in 2018, there's a guide, an ecosystem forestier exceptionnel, so exceptional forest ecosystems, EFEs. Their guide for getting this designation gives the example of a forest where Quercus Alba, so white oak, and Quercus rubra, red oak, would be found together in the same area. That could be an example of, an EFE, because the areas where that is possible in Quebec, very limited. And sure enough, this is one of those spots. You see here, this is in early autumn last year. The white oaks in the area turned just this vibrant red, which is just unmistakable. It's like, it's easiest to find them by their color in autumn, it seems. While the red oaks here actually don't turn red. They more often turn yellow. And you can tell these red oaks because they got the points here, whereas the white oaks, they got more the lobed finger look. So they gave some other examples of ecosystems or forest habitats that could be part of these EFEs. So as we said, oak forest with red and white oak, maple forest of sugar maple and bitternut hickory. We have that here too. We don't have these kind of floodplain forests of American basswood and butternuts. Those are present on site, but more reduced in number. As well, we also have a lot of bur oaks. We don't have as many as the swamp white oaks, but we do have the hackberries and the shagbark hickories, which would kind of, I think, tick that mark. Thanks to the work of Owen Clarkin and some of the inventorying he helped me with there, we do have lots of elms, including rock elms on kind of limey soil. And lastly, we also have, eastern red cedar and as well as eastern white cedar on kind of limey soil there as well on the dry parts. So we kind of check a lot of these like boxes and what they're saying an exceptional forest would be. Not only that, but the area is also really interesting in its bedrock geology. So it's a sandstone. But on old categorizations is often listed as a limestone. It's within the Chasey or Chasey group. So it's about 480 million years ago, and it formed from kind of the basin of coral reefs and stuff. So it's sandstone, but it's got a calcite matrix. There's a lot of lime in here, which kind of overall, the site is kind of neutral. And probably more likely it's in pockets where some areas are a lot more acidic, some areas are more basic. And you got this kind of really interesting mix of flora that's kind of existing on the site. This picture of moss isn't typical of that. I just like the photo of the rocks and the moss kind of growing on it. But here you got some nodding thread moss that I took a photo of last year. The site is also pretty important because it's part of a corridor. Now we're also working to secure this corridor that you see here between Fort Boucher, which is an 800-acre reserve that's being preserved. There's a lot of forest north of that is kind of uncertain status, but for now it's really biodiverse and beautiful. And that connects Gatineau Park all the way through Fort Boucher. This old corridor, which is owned by Ministry of Transport Quebec, was supposed to be a highway and a bridge, but that's not going to be built. Connects to our proposed park here. So it really allows animals and birds and all sorts of wildlife to kind of move through these corridors. We even had, not only just foxes and turkeys, but even bears have gone through here in the past summer. The area is also special because it's kind of in the southwest corner of Quebec. It's on a south-facing slope with the Yeardley Escarpment in the back. Oak forests are common on kind of south-facing slopes there that could get kind of dry at times. And this is one of the, south-facing slope at the very southern tip of Quebec. Here we have Mud Lake, where it kind of forms another corridor. A lot of birds and stuff travel in between. you see a lot of the same species. The seeds obviously travel in between these two spots. And a lot of species that are really at their northern limit or even their west or eastern limit here are found here at this site. And it makes for a really interesting ecology. So starting off, this is kind of some sites that are more typical of like the savanna type of habitats. So areas where the canopy doesn't really enclose. Some of these areas are more like shrubs too. They take on almost an alvar-like ecosystem, but again, it's sandstone that's driving it, and it varies. It's not all high in calcium. So the most common tree that we see here is Quercus rubra, the northern red oak. It's the most common oak in Quebec overall and the most northern of the oak species found. It's the only member of the Quercus section Labatte, so the red oak group. It's the only native member of that in Quebec, although other ones are sometimes planted. And yeah, outside of the red and silver maple swamps that are kind of found along the Ottawa River, this is probably the most common tree in the forest. In these savanna areas, you get a lot of bur oaks found here. These trees are actually somewhat rare in Quebec, listed as S3, S4. I include the NatureServe ranking, sometimes supplementing it with the Quebec government ranking if I know it's on a list. So yeah, Quercus macrocarpa, it gets its name from having the largest oak of any, the largest acorns of any oak in North America. It also has a hairy cap on it that helps identify it. And yeah, there's two other members of the same section, Quercus, that are found in the region, and it can form hybrids with both white oak and swamp white oak. We have white oak here on this site documented, but I haven't found any swamp white oak. There could be, because there's lots of wetlands, and they're found just a little downriver. Here's a beautiful bur oak, kind of one of the larger ones, kind of just in its open habitat, just all open. It's really beautiful seeing them now because they got the really corky bark, and they're really easy to distinguish when their leaves aren't on them as well. One cool find, this was just a couple weeks ago, was I found an oak ruff bullet gal wasp. So these are galls that form, that wasps form on either bur oak or swamp white oak is apparently the other one they do. But this wasp, I couldn't see really any records of it in Quebec. I found one other person posting about it on a bug forum a few years ago where they took one. They've got photos of one in Gatineau, but there really aren't that many records of this insect in Quebec, which I thought was kind of cool. And it's a really interesting one. They have alternating generations where one generation will be all asexual females. Those are the ones that came out of these galls. Only asexual females come out of there, and they're the winged morph of those. And so the ones that can fly around, but they lay their eggs on the leaf buds of oaks. And those eggs, when they're born, will be the male and female generation, which will sexually reproduce, but they don't have any wings or anything, so they're stuck kind of to the tree. And then their eggs, they lay those in the green twigs, which then eventually form these. Really weird species, but I thought that was super cool. So here's another a common plant that you see in the savanna kind of portions. It's wild basil. It's technically a vulnerable plant in Quebec, but it has no status in Ontario. One of the examples of you just cross the river and things that were common all of a sudden are rare and, you know, at the northern limit of their range. So yeah, it's sometimes harvested as an aromatic herb, but leave these ones alone. They also, most of the wild ones don't smell like anything, but a really beautiful flower. And kind of to show you the opposite end, so wild basil is associated with chalky kind of soils, that limestone. And within even just a few feet, you have low bush blueberries growing, which I thought was really strange because, you know, in my head, I always associate those with like as an ericaceous plant with like very acidic environments. But yeah, along with velvet leaf blueberry, early low bush blueberry is one of two blueberry species reported here. There are also likely hybrids of the two here present here as well. We haven't confirmed that. It'd be great if someone would. But yeah, these two species make a large part of the kind of like heath in the oak heath forest. It's a common plant association where you got the oak trees and then ericaceous plants below. There's a couple others that are present in this forest, but blueberries are probably the most common. One of the common native grasses that we have here is poverty oak grass. It's a very common one overall. It's found in both very acidic rock barrens and in alvars and those kind of places as well. So the limestone rock barrens as well. It's sometimes, I call it curly grass a lot of the time because it produces these really distinct curls when the plant dies back. It forms large populations in areas. Another one, this one's more rare, is Pennsylvania sedge, also known as oak sedge. It's listed as vulnerable in Quebec. The genus Carex is the most numerous of species in Quebec. I believe there's 270 around that listed in Quebec. Oak sedge, as I said, is commonly associated with like oak forest, so its habitat in Quebec is relatively limited. It's a really beautiful one. It forms these kind of perfectly managed like landscape lawns because it only grows to a certain height. It's one I really I'm actually trying to replace a lot of my lawn with this species because it's appropriate for that. Here we got some big leaf aster forming kind of a big patch within the Pennsylvania sedge. It's a very common flower that you see here, this in kind of more of the shaded areas. It also is traditionally a harvested food among Algonquin and Anishinaabe, boiled and eaten like spinach. Thought that was kind of interesting. Here we have prickly ash. So this one's kind of interesting because it's associated with alvar habitats. I believe the alvar botanist, Dr. Catling, covered a lot of these kind of habitats in Quebec of the alvars here being a lot of prickly ash alvars. It's also the only member of the citrus family to live this far, well, to be native this far north. Hop trees are sometimes planted, but this one's definitely indigenous to our region. It was known as toothache tree because it has a very powerful ability to like freeze your mouth, kind of as a numbing agent, the berries and the leaves. Its closest relative is, what's it called? Szechuan pepper. And the Haudenosaunee, the Mohawk and Seneca people, etc. They would use it as actually in the same way as a spice in that way. There's also some red junipers here, which are pretty cool. They were formerly listed as an endangered species in Quebec until recently. In Quebec, they're really only found in the Outaouais, sparse towards Montreal, and a couple around Lake Champlain, but they're even kind of rarer there. They're mostly around like the Eurybia escarpment and Aylmer. In the corridor, actually, north of kind of within the proposed park, but in the corridor towards Boucher Forest is one of the largest red junipers I've ever seen, which is pretty cool and part of the reason we want to save this place. Here we got some smooth carrion flower. As its name suggests, it doesn't smell too pretty. It smells like rotting meat, but these kind of balls of flowers, when they turn into berries, they look just so surreal, just these spheres just of berries hanging from the trees. Here we got a photo by Owen Clarkin. So downy arrowwood, this is a viburnum species that in Quebec is really only found in the Outaouais. It used to be on the endangered species list for Quebec. It was on the first edition, apparently. It hasn't been lately, but it might go back there because it seems to be really attacked by the viburnum leaf beetle. Another somewhat rare viburnum, which is found more in the shaded areas, is maple leaf viburnum. It has the same vulnerability ranking, but thankfully it's not seemingly attacked by the viburnum leaf beetle. And yeah, it's generally considered rare because it's another one of those species that is at its northern kind of limit in southern Quebec. There's also Lonicera dioica, so limber honeysuckle. This is a cool honeysuckle that it has like a cup over its berries and flowers. It's a vine, but it kind of cups over the red flowers, which are probably, I believe they're hummingbird pollinated. It's a somewhat rare plant in Quebec. It's associated again with alvars in Quebec, preferring alkaline soil. Interestingly, unlike its name would suggest, it's not a dioecious plant. So it has male and female on the same plant rather than dioecious, which has separate male and female. Here is some American bittersweet. Again, another vulnerable plant in Quebec. It its bright red berries are really gorgeous and they nourish a lot of birds. In addition to being at the northern limit of its range, American bittersweet is also threatened by Asian bittersweet. The two produce hybrids that are often infertile, and it's often the male pollen fertilizing the female American bittersweet. So it kind of takes up a lot of the resources and reduces American bittersweet numbers over generations if it keeps up. One of my favorite ground covers in the area is this barren strawberry. It was one of the first plants I noticed in the area because it has these somewhat kind of evergreen leaves. They're persistent through winter. And while it's an uncommon plant in Quebec, it's fairly common throughout a lot of the forests here. And it's got these beautiful little yellow flowers, and yeah, it creates large patches of ground cover. We also have a number of different service berries. I believe there's also the round leaf service berry, which has been identified in our forest. This one is somewhat rare, or uncommon rather, in Quebec. It grows pretty large. It's kind of a tree as far as service berries go. And again, it has a fairly limited range in Quebec. So one of the other really, like probably the most common animal I see are these garter snakes. With the rocky habitats that there is, and kind of, I see big stacks of rocks in a lot of places and broken rock kind of edges. I think there's a lot of hibernaculums, if I'm pronouncing that right, in the area. So in the 2012 inventory, 2 other species of snake were reported, including the vulnerable milk snake. Sadly, this species has not been found again in recent years, so it's kind of a question mark that we have. We'd really like to get more information on this and kind of study the dynamics of snake populations in our proposed park. And yeah, there's also red-bellied snakes that are present in the area as well. It's kind of moving into the deeper woods here. So just to give you kind of an image of what it looks like. Most of these trees are not that old. I think the area was probably cleared in the 1920s or so, possibly 1930s. There are a few old trees, but for the most part, everything seems fairly young, like around 50, 60 to 80 years. So this is one of the my favorite things that's popping up around right now. So the yellow trout lilies, they form really massive patches in the forest sections here. There is also the blue bead lily, which is popping up. They're really great. Here's another one of those heath kind of plants that's associated with oak, and you see it here among the red oak leaves. But there's at least one patch of wintergreen. It's not a rare plant in Quebec, but I don't really see it in these kind of super urban areas. So it's really cool that we do have at least a population there. Moving on to some of the fungi, I really am not an expert in this area, so I'm just kind of scooting through. But according to Yolanda Dalpe, at least, apparently oaks have a fairly large and interesting association with fungi. I guess the ones that are associated with their roots. But also, I'm curious of the leaves because they really mat. They don't rot down. You know, I got leaves here that I've been saving for a year almost, and they really keep the moisture and they mat on grounds, performing a dense like duff layer. So I'm curious if that impacts it at all. Yeah, here you got some great funnel veil amanitas. You can see kind of the rocks and stuff. It's kind of everywhere, the sandstone, and of course the red oaks and acorns. A couple boletes. I'm not sure what kinds these are, but they're really cool looking. That's for sure. This is one of my favorite ones to see, the silky piggyback mushroom. So I think this is kind of a telltale sign and like true proof of like the rich fungal diversity that there is here. Because Asterophora parasitica is a parasitic mushroom that only grows on other mushrooms, specifically brittle gills of the Rusula genus and milky caps of the Lectarius genus. So I find that just super interesting. Apparently there's even a yeast that has been found in the gills of Asterophora parasitica. So, you know, a fungi that grows on fungi that only grows on fungi. So here we got the wetlands. So there's several swamps. You got kind of these upper swamps. It kind of drains into each other here. You got the deepest pond here and the marsh. This is all very heavily influenced by the beavers. And here's a photo of one of the marshier areas kind of looking north. And one of the swamps that is recently kind of converted into a marsh. You can see it got a little bit too deep for the trees. One of the swamps that's kind of older is all buttonbush. It's really beautiful. This is one of the few species in the coffee family. It's not rare, but it produces just really stunning flowers. These are its seeds. I don't have photos of its flowers this year, but hopefully next time I will. So some recent history of the wetlands. The marshes in their current form, they're relatively recent formations. It appears that they were historically forested. It can be seen from aerial photos from 1945, 1965, and 1976. It's all forest during that time. During that time, there were channels there's a lot of developments that were going on north of the site that kind of brought more water and directed more water to the area that used to go through creeks elsewhere. So yeah, a lot of streams were diverted in the region and other streams were buried. So here we got a photo of the area from 1945. Here we got kind of Fraser Road. I think this is Cote here. You got Lamoureux, all these houses kind of here in Hickory Point. An old marsh here. Old maps show that a stream used to flow down through here. There's a marsh here, as well as a bit of wetlands, it looks like here and here, but a lot of this definitely looks like forest. This is kind of that upland area that I was showing earlier. It kind of has more of that savanna kind of look to it. And even in 1945 here, it kind of got, it's got a little bit more of a sparse habitat. Here is the sandstone pavement barrens, which is a lot more of an alvar-like ecosystem. That's really interesting. It still is very open to this day, but things have changed a lot. So for example, look at this marsh here. In 1965, we go now, and now that marsh is just totally gone. So the water that was draining through this way, now they're trying to make it go the other way. Now there's kind of 3 radio towers that occupied the site for a long time. You can see there's still houses here. They've carved a new road here though, kind of going and put a new ditch beside it too that you can see kind of draining. I believe this is the ditch that will eventually form the marsh. So now we see in color in 1976, not too much has changed. There used to be a nickel factory in Deschênes, and apparently when they bulldozed it, they threw most of this debris into this marsh here. So you can see that in the 70s when they were doing that. Move on to 2002 now, and you can kind of still see where the debris they poured into the marsh was. This area is still fairly open, but now there's a new drainage ditch again, which they've redug, going here this time, carrying water from developments that you can't see further north. This, you can tell there's dead trees kind of just in here, just floating everywhere. This area is recently deforested, but this area is still forested. And that road in the 60s, you can kind of see where it was here, but it's not where the bike path is these days. Go forward again 17 years. So here we are in 2019. Now this is filled in with a lot of cattails and stuff, but also the marsh has opened up even further. The 2017 and 2019 floods have killed a lot of trees in that area. And so more of the wetland is even turning to marsh rather than swamp. Interesting seeing how these dynamics go. So first came the muskrat. According to local residents that I've talked to, the first animal that came to modified these channels were muskrats. Now muskrats don't build dams per se as beavers do, but they like to tunnel into the side of these channels, causing them to often collapse. They also do push-ups where they push up dirt and they dig dirt from the bottom of a ditch or something, and they pile it up into these mounds with, you know, earth matter. There's a lot of First Nation creation myths that I've heard where it's muskrat bringing the first dirt from the ground and creating these pileups. So much like that, the first creator of the marsh was really the muskrats here, which kind of modified these channels. Here's a great photo of a muskrat. I really got to thank Charles for allowing me to use some of his excellent photography here. Now, one of the main food sources or main things that they eat are cattails, so that you kind of see in the background. Here we got a photo from December 31st last year. They're the second largest native rodent next to the beaver, nutria, which look a lot like muskrats, and I believe they're introduced from Argentina here. I think they're around twice as big, but I'm really not an expert in mammals, and I'd like to learn more. So next came the beaver. It is believed that sometime during the late 70s, the beavers started damming up the channel, causing water levels to rise and drown a lot of the trees. In 2021, there are now at least 4 beavers that are residing in the area. So here we got a nice big food stash, I believe, of the beaver. Great photos. Here we got 2 of them, and you can see kind of their dam behind them. A photo of the lodge in winter. They got at least 2 lodges in the main marsh. Here's it getting ready for winter, kind of getting its food storage ready. It's amazing how far they can travel under ice and stuff to bring their food to, with these very large sticks of 30 feet sometimes. Sadly, we deal with animosity towards the beaver. One of their lodges or dams was attacked last year. In end of November, someone with a shovel dug a section. We still get comments on our Facebook page and stuff being like, "Ah, darn beavers" and stuff. And we're really wanting to start a campaign to kind of familiarize and sensitize people to the beaver. Our friend or our neighbors, the beaver campaign. We'd really appreciate any advice, because we got questions such as what's a good viewing distance for people, because lots of people want to go and see the beavers, but we want to make sure they don't get too close. Let them do their thing. But yeah, any advice on this kind of conservation matter would be greatly appreciated as we try to begin this campaign and stop activities like this. Because if the water was to go below their entrance level, freeze below that in winter, beavers would probably die. There's catfish in this pond now. That's how much has changed. There's a lot of other stuff relying on these beavers. So as I mentioned, beavers are kind of a keystone species. They greatly modify the habitat. And once the beavers came into the marsh, a lot of other stuff came too. So as I mentioned, catfish are present in the pond. Otters now live in the marsh. A lot of birds nest in those dead trees there. And a lot of amphibians and reptiles have taken advantage of this new ecological niche. So here we got some North American river otters. I absolutely love this photo. Look at her. She's absolutely lost in the sauce. So yeah, a mother otter has raised at least 3 pups during the marsh this past summer. Lots of people saw them. One can identify a female otter here by the pink on their nose. Apparently the male otters will bite them and rough them up during mating. Here we got an otter hanging out on a beaver lodge. They will eat beavers, but it doesn't look like they've eaten any of these beavers. So I think it's a less common food source. They're kind of like the apex predator, I guess, of the marsh in many ways. I think like coyotes or wolves would probably, eat an otter, but I don't know what else really would. So yeah, here we have another female otter. Charles taking just absolutely amazing photos. Here we have an otter and a turtle. The story here is apparently the otter just investigated it, even though they'll eat the turtles. It just went up, sniffed it, poked it even, but then just left it be on its way. So here we have painted turtle. They're apparently secure, and they're one of at least 4 species of turtle to live within the park. We have snapping turtles, painted turtles, common map turtles, and common musk turtles too. It'd be interesting if we had any more. It'd be cool to see a blending turtle or something, but this is kind of stuff that we'd really like to know more about ongoing. So here we got snapping turtles. They're a species of special interest in the Species at Risk Act in 2011. They're the largest freshwater turtle in Canada. Here's a photo of one in the swamp. We try to do some kind of citizen science mapping of their nesting and stuff, because people all the time we're seeing them just along this bike path or along this bike path here. So, or down here, because there's trails kind of surrounding the area. So we try to get people as they saw them just to take a note and let us know what they saw them doing and try to geotag that. These are just some of our observations from last year. We're hoping to keep track of this over years and yeah, just try and learn more. I showed a lot of photos of duckweed and stuff. Some of the stuff that I thought was interesting is that in addition to the duckweed, we actually have fringed heartwort growing here. So this is a species that has no special status in Ontario, but in Quebec is actually considered imperiled. And it's a really interesting one that has two kind of forms. There's a terrestrial form that, like, if it grows on a stick or on land, it'll actually form a little colony and look like, you know, a wart plant that's kind of growing. But it also has a aquatic floating form, which is seen here in this middle one. These other ones are they're common duckweed, which is another native plant, but this middle one here is a much rarer floating plant that is, I think, is pretty interesting. So we also have a lot of amphibians. So we got American bullfrogs here. There's 9 amphibians that have been documented in the proposed park, including 3 species of salamanders and 6 species of frogs and toads. So other species of frogs and toads that have been seen here, you got the leopard frogs. In a lot of the drier areas, you just see them hopping around. It's like a frog prairie. You know, it's a really cool sight to see. I'm sure lots of the snakes there that are eating these frogs and stuff too. There's a lot of Eastern American toads. I've seen green frogs there. There's gray tree frogs as well as spring peeper. There might be some other ones here too. We'd really like to, again, learn more about the herpetology of the region. I just like this photo. It's just a good one. Yeah, here we got an American toad taken by Owen Clarkin, sorry. Yeah, as far as salamanders go, there's 3 species that were documented in the 2012 inventory. Sadly, I don't have any photos of these in the park. As mentioned earlier, all the photos that you're seeing here are all just sites from the park itself, all taken from there. And I don't have, no one has taken any good photos recently of salamanders there. But during the 2012 inventory, they found even common mud puppies there, blue spotted salamander and eastern newt. So again, we have a conservation committee there, and we're looking to better understand the situation of reptiles and amphibians. We'd like to learn more about population sizes and dynamics, potentially the locations of hibernaculums. For the purpose of limiting activity, we don't want, you know, dogs, interactions and stuff, just to keep people away and stuff. We'd also like to know about the continued presence of milk snake and potentially other snakes and stuff. So here we have an osprey. Osprey frequent the marsh and the pond fairly often. Here we have one with a catfish that it pulled from the pond. There's one bur oak in particular that stands in the middle of the marsh that's long dead but ginormous. And I often see it just perched right there. Here we see some of the birds that have nested in the dead trees in the marsh. So we got a pileated woodpecker and a northern flicker here. If you go there right now to the marsh, it'll just be like a symphony of red-winged blackbirds. It's a beautiful sound. But rather than show you the singing males, I decided to include a photo of one of the females. And here we have one eating a damselfly. Here's a photo of a green heron and a yellow warbler and some honeysuckle and a wood duck, Canard branchu. One of the bigger swamps of the park is actually called Marais branchu in honor of these ducks. Here we're going to go down to the beach now. So this area struck me as being somewhat special because a lot of it hasn't been as disturbed as the other coastlines of the park. So here we got from 2019, and just look at some of the stuff there. Here we got a beautiful site. You can see lots of cord grass, prairie cord grass that's growing in the water here. There's lots of cool ground covers here. So like this is just one site that, you know, just looking at the floor, this is what you see. And it's all like Canada anemone, potato bean. We have the Apios Americana kind of in here, as well as these 3-leaf ones aren't poison ivy. They're actually American hog peanut. Here we have Apios Americana. I think their flowers are really cool. This bay was actually mentioned as being a potential site of an Algonquin village back in the day. In 1901, T.W. Edwin Soter, he wrote about a lot of the discoveries he was making in this region. He found a lot of flints were being worked on there that were coming from a creek in the area, as well as he thought that there was doing a lot of tool work that was being done. I think also they were probably making, using the nuts and making flour. A lot of that stuff was being ground up here. It makes sense for the area to be like well used, specifically because it's a portage site as well. Here we have some common sneezeweed. Again, another vulnerable plant in Quebec because it's really only found along the Ottawa and St. Lawrence rivers and sometimes into the eastern townships. We also have Canada moonseed. Again, another vulnerable one in Quebec. Here we have some hooded merganser and some ducklings. So here's the old portage route. You got the rapids kind of here. It's not really showing it exactly. Here we got the one marsh. I believe this is Marais Canard Branchou. Either that one or this one is, I forget. Each one's got its kind of a name. Here we got Pointe des Carriers, so Hickory Point. There used to be a log flume kind of here, or I'll go to the next image actually. There used to be a log flume through here, making this an island. This area here actually has a lot of the old white oaks. There's some really majestic white oaks growing there that are absolutely ginormous. Part of the issue that we have though is that we don't have very many young ones. So there's a lot of buckthorn, and one area we'd like to look at in the future is there a way that we kind of decrease the buckthorn and encourage these white oaks in particular, because there's some big ones there. So as mentioned, in Hickory Point, we have the shagbark hickory. It's unranked by NatureServe, but is listed as a rare plant in Quebec, and is on the list of plants susceptible to being listed as endangered or threatened. The western point of the portage is known as Pointe des Carriers, in reference to the sizable population of these shagbark hickories. This population is the furthest recorded up the Ottawa River and the westernmost in Quebec. The edible nuts of the tree, along with the acorns, were long gathered here by Algonquin and Anishinaabe since times immemorial. Here you got that beautiful shagging bark that is just, you know, so clearly identifies it. I noticed that this tree was like one of the first trees to lose its leaves in fall. The second it dipped at all, this tree lost its leaves, which, you know, still makes it a very attractive tree because this bark is just so interesting. So here's some photos by Owen of the site. We got the large shagbark hickories, which are actually like pecans. And then you got the bitternut hickories here. Yeah, pecan is just a Carrier illinoisis, I believe. We don't eat these other ones because they don't produce reliably. They have boom and bust years, whereas illinoisis has very consistent harvests, I believe. In the swampy areas, we also have hackberry. Found one of these. These are listed as vulnerable. They got really interesting bark that looks like sedimentary stone, and really interesting berries too. They got like a hard coating, sometimes known as sugar berry. They taste a little like a chocolate M&M or a peanut M&M. They're very interesting tree. Here we got a photo of the Sentier des Voyageurs, so the Voyageur pathway, and there's just a towering white oak over the pathway that you can see in a lot of the areas. And this one is one of the younger ones in the area. There's a much older, bigger one in the region too. But yeah, as mentioned earlier, one of the issues is most of the white oaks are fairly old, relatively speaking to some of the younger ones. Yeah, they turn a brilliant red in fall. The leaves that I was kind of showing up to my camera here are taken from this one that you see on the left. It fell off the tree onto the cycle path, so I decided to take it and see what I could do with it. Very beautiful trees. Wish we had more of them. They're somewhat rare. So moving over, this is Eel Conroy. So this is a fairly important site for nesting birds. So here we have some double-crested cormorants. Since returning the site, they've kind of deforested one side of it. Some people hate these birds for this reason, but it actually opens up the habitat for a lot of ground nesting birds. And also it's fairly remarkable that they've been able to come back in such strong numbers, considering they were, pretty much wiped out for so many years. So obviously ring-billed gulls are the most common nesting bird that we're seeing there, but I'm sure there's other ones. I don't really know my birds well, but I know there's been Caspian terns that have been sighted in the region and like in the park, and this is probably where they're nesting if they're nesting here. So there's probably other interesting things here. For example, like it was a couple years ago, some great egrets came to the island to hang out. So Howard got some photos of that, which I thought was pretty cool. Looking over the rapids, one thing worth mentioning is that these are some of the few natural flowing rapids, even though there's lots of old dams present. They aren't currently dammed, at least. The last kind of area I want to show you is kind of the sandstone pavement barrens. So I wrote a big report on this area here. It's all owned by one developer. It's called One Rue Deschênes. I got a lot of help from Jacob and Owen actually inventorying this place over the summer, and I believe some of you other folk have also gone here as well. So the sandstone forms a very flat pavement, and it floods all the time, but also in summer becomes really dry. As mentioned, some of the areas are more acidic, but some areas have a lot more lime. So you got kind of an interesting mix of flora here. One of my favorite spots is in the north section, and sadly, this is probably all going to get developed in August. So June or July will be like the last time to go see this, for all I know. But here we have a big, beautiful field of wild chives. Now, I don't think, sadly, that these are the native ones. Despite this being a species that is indigenous to Quebec, I believe these are the var schunoprasum compared to the var sibiricum. They grow more, these ones grow really bunchy, whereas the other ones kind of grow into small bunches, more grass-like. Var sibiricum is also known as giant chives. I believe they're a bit bigger. Though these ones, I wonder if maybe they're, I don't know, who knows, is it possible they're hybrids or something? I was having a lot of trouble identifying these. Some of the other areas here, this photo is a little overexposed, but you can see a lot of the gray goldenrod, and there's lots of early goldenrod, and there's wild sagebrush, which is kind of interesting growing here, which I'll cover. Lots of fleabanes and stuff growing, some interesting wild grasses, a lot of native stuff growing. And then just a wall of buckthorn in the back that's slowly creeping from a wet area. It's really the biggest threat to these kind of alvar-like sandstone pavement barrens. So there's lots of giant junipers in this area. Some of them, well over 30, 40 feet in diameter. This size suggests that they've been in open habitat for a long time. In the background, there's a lot of popular trees, trembling aspen and big tooth aspen. They form kind of a savanna-like habitat. Lots of sunlight still gets in below them. Along with the oaks, they're kind of one of the more savanna trees. Here you got some of the cladonia reindeer moss, or lichens rather. I think there's 3 species here, which is pretty cool. Lots of different varieties. They form big patches. Like I think this is another just a characteristic photo of what some of the ground cover is. So you got all this cladonia lichen, some mosses, some panic grasses growing, some wild sagebrush, strawberries. It's just not too many places I know that you can see all this stuff. Now here we have Ulmus thomasi. So this is actually the only endangered species that I've covered so far with formal protection. So since February, when red junipers or Juniperus virginiana was taken off the endangered species list, this is the only one that we have in our park that is still on the list. So it's associated with limestone habitats, which is why it's kind of rare. Its presence is a testament to these kind of transitional environment that we have here between alvars and acidic kind of soils. And there's at least 2 healthy populations, healthy kind of being misspelled here, but consistent about a dozen documented trees, which is pretty cool. Here on the photo, you see it's kind of corky habitat or habit. So it forms a lot of cork on its side bark. And that's where it gets its French name, orme liège, from cork elm. There's also peach-leaved willow. So they're another imperiled species, really only found in the Outaouais in Quebec. They're also found in the marshy or the wet areas, the depressions of the sandstone pavement barren. And there's quite a number of these trees present. They're the 2nd largest native willow in Quebec, next to the black willow. Another sign of the ground cover. I just like taking a lot of these shots. And one of the last species I want to bring your attention to is Artemisia ludoviciana. Now, this species is not technically indigenous to Quebec, but is considered indigenous in Ontario. It grows throughout a lot of the the sandstone pavement barren. Here, growing in some poverty oak grass that you can see. Here's a good photo of its seed fruiting structure that I wanted to include earlier. But this sage is actually harvested by a number of Indigenous people in the area. The Ottawa-based youth group Assembly 7 Generations go here. So we're working pretty hard to try and save this, and we would like some insight for. We're trying to figure out what kind of stewardship practices we could engage with here. It's pretty dense in areas, as you can see here. Here it's growing with probably a lot of Poa compressa. I'm imagining Canada bluegrass. Also likes those kind of drier habitats. As well, there's a lot of fleabane, which is really beautiful. Lots of yarrow growing in asters, lots of strawberries. It's a really beautiful field here of mostly native plants. You got some tansy and stuff in the background that likes to invade these kind of habitats. And the last species I'm going to bring your attention to is Panicum philadelphicum. So Philadelphia panic grass. It's been on the list of plants that could be considered endangered or threatened for a long time. It's been on that list for decades. It was discovered in Quebec only in 1993, and its presence in Aylmer launched the recognition of alvars as an ecosystem in Quebec. So before that, they weren't really recognized to exist in Quebec, but someone noted these panic grasses were growing, and I was pretty pleased to find them growing here as well. So just to kind of talk about next steps and stuff, our big goal is to secure status of the park and corridor, the corridor going to Boucher Forest. I haven't included a lot of photos of the spot here so far, but there's some really amazing habitat there, big old cedar groves, a pond, areas of a lot of, as I mentioned, the largest eastern red cedar, the largest red juniper I've seen, and so forth. We'd like to develop some educational partnerships with schools and organizations. There's a lot of research projects that we'd really like to do. We'd like to contact some of the colleges, the CEGEPs, the universities. We're currently developing a conservation committee. We're trying to get some insight from experts. And our conservation committee is also launching a mapping project of the area. There's a basic kind of cartography that's been done, but we really want to go in with a grid and map things out pretty thoroughly, and then hopefully do that again in a few years. We're trying to get equipment and stuff for that. So if any of you have some leads on that kind of stuff, clinometers, etc., to borrow, please let us know. We're currently cleaning up garbage from the park. For many years, construction crews had dropped off kind of excess construction supplies there. There's a lot of old like shingles and stuff like that that have just been dumped. And but at the same time, there's also a lot of archaeological kind of sites, because there's a pioneer homestead that used to be there as well. So we also got to do some archaeological surveying to make sure that while we're cleaning up the garbage, we're not throwing out anything kind of historical. Longer term goals is after the mapping, we'd like to figure out some of the removal of invasive species and rehabilitation of certain degraded sites. We might be working with, for example, some of the neighborhood associations to kind of green the biking path that's there, the old rail line, try to renaturalize that, and then kind of create a nice corridor leading all the way to the forest. And their buckthorn removal efforts are kind of going to help inform our future efforts. And we're still just trying to gather, trying to identify which areas should be intervened with, and so forth. Sorry, my phone just started ringing. But yeah, if you got any ideas on projects or would like to help out, we'd love to hear from you. You can message us at this link below that I can include elsewhere. That's parkdeschênespark@gmail.com. And yeah, I'd like to open it up for questions, comments, etc. Can you handle questions and stuff, Jacob? I'm not sure.
Yep. Yeah. If you have a question, just go ahead and type it into the chat, or unmute yourself and ask. It's let's see. Gert Dressen says that Donna Dubroy of the Ottawa Carleton Wildlife Center should be able to give you lots of advice on how to educate the public about beavers.
Thank you.
And usually we have a lot of questions. Anyone? We could assume that because there's few questions, but you just covered it so thoroughly and so well that everyone is completely informed at this point.
I guess so.
No?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I didn't cover. Oh, I think Heather's got a question there.
I do have a question. I'm wondering if you are documenting sightings of species on iNaturalist and if you have a project set up for the area.
We do. I've set up a project there. Please put your observations in there. If there's anything super sensitive, I mean, please let us know. But aside from that, yeah, please put your observations in there. I
just like to make a comment as well. I'm really thrilled to know that the area is being turned into a park. This totally came out of the blue for me, but I grew up on the corner of Fraser and the Lower Road.
Oh.
My parents bought a house there in 1967. So I remember when the rail track was still there, and I remember going for hikes in that area before all of the development.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that your project is a success.
There's been so much development that's been happening over the years. I remember there's a community outroar when the site right across the street in early 2000s, when that was all developed. I believe a lot of the protests and stuff were actually an Ottawa field naturalist member of the time. Ian Huggett was the Aylmer. I kept on seeing his name come up for a lot of that stuff. But yeah, it's great that the community is really coming out strong. We've had a lot of success with Fort Boucher, so we're kind of basing a lot of our efforts off that. We're eventually hoping to link our parks together is the goal. So we got a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm really excited about what the future can be. If we're successful with this project, we're hoping to kind of spin off another project over on Lac Beauchamp area as well. And we're hoping that these kind of community run, essentially creating the infrastructure to run a park within Gatineau to kind of force Gatineau to do it,
All right, I've got some questions in the chat now. Deborah Huron is asking, are you familiar with the Chevalier de Troyes journal entry from the 1600s about the portage to the oak forest?
Yeah, I know that's where there's a historian that I've been reading a bit, Rick Henderson. He's covered a lot of this stuff, but yeah, it was Chevalier de Troyes. He was the first writing of the area's Deschênes that we know. So yeah, it's pretty cool. The area goes back a long time, and as mentioned, it's not just the one oak species that we find here. We find the bur oak, the white oak, and the red oak, and I'm sure I'm going to find a swamp white oak there too. There's one in Templeton, so it's just a matter of time.
Elizabeth Gamble is asking, you mentioned the developer might bulldoze some of the pavement area as soon as this summer. Is there an option for like a plant salvage kind of guerrilla operation?
So we're actually, we've been working with the developer for a while. We sent a letter back in November, and we've had negotiations since January. We've gotten them to agree to save at least around 10 to 15% of the southern part. That's going to be kind of most contiguous with our park. We're really trying to push it up to 30% is our goal. But there is a pavement barren on the most northern corner, which is kind of the most susceptible area of development, so to speak. And that happens to be where all the chives are for the most part, sadly. But yeah, I'm going to have a talk with them about seeing if we can dig up all the plants before they move in with the bulldozers. We'll see how it goes. I mean,
better than bulldozed, I guess, eh?
I don't know.
All right, so Judy Garbo is asking, she says she's never been to the area, and she'd like to know, can people walk in the area that many of the photos have been taken in? Do people need to stay on the path so that they are not destructive?
I mean, yes, please stay on the paths, but I mean, at the same time, the forest has been kind of an unofficial hangout spot for teenagers and stuff for so many decades that there's like too many trails in the forest, so to speak. So you're never far away from some really interesting stuff by just staying on the trails. It's really, it's a spider web of trails throughout the forest. So yeah, stay on the trails, but like, that's not limiting you too much.
Got a comment from Louis Larrivée that he's birded a few times in the area, but was often inhibited by Quebec's warnings against visitors from Ontario.
Yeah.
Had some challenges last year doing a lot of the conservation work on both sides, I think. Lynn Ovenden would like to know what portion of the park has secure protection now?
I mean, most of the park is in a gray zone, which is why we're operating. So there's no intent, the land that the city owns is not being developed. They've pulled it from the market. We're trying to secure actual park status for it. Because people, I guess, thought it was protected already. And then, you have a change of administration. People forget that there was an inventory. People forgot that we put all these signs recognizing all these, biodiversity here. Let's just sell this forest. Because too much time, there wasn't official status granted. Even at the south part where the rapids are, you often see that on areas as Park Rapids Deschênes. There's no official park status for that region. There is an area, Park Riverain, which has conservation status currently. We're trying to extend that for official park status to the whole area. So technically, nothing, I guess, has official parks, really has full protection right now, but there's no, except for the one property that we're in negotiations with, there's no current threats to that property. However, we've been having trouble with getting Ministry of Transport Quebec to start discussions with us about the corridor and stuff. The park, southern part that I was outlining today, that's about 100 acres. The corridor itself is about 168 acres. So it's a much bigger spot that's right in between all these developments connecting Boucher Forest. So it, they see it as big dollar signs with that, but there's a lot of potential for having this kind of green corridor connecting all the way to Gatineau Park from the Ottawa River, which would be pretty remarkable.
Okay, and so we've got a couple of, looks like if there does have to be plant salvage, that you'll be able to find some volunteers here. Gamble are making some offers for you and for help and for relocating as well.
So I just put the Gmail back in the message just so that people can copy that down if they want to send it anything.
That was the last question too. Could we get the email again? So there it is. If you need the email again, it's in the chat, everyone. And if you don't know how to get to that, you just move your mouse around, go to the bottom of the screen. You'll see the chat button appear. Click on that, and it'll be it'll pop up either in the middle or on the side for you. All right. I don't think there's any more questions.
Oh, I see one by for guided
oh yeah,
guided explorations. Yes, I will be doing those as soon as I can. I was, yeah, like we're trying to do a virtual kind of tour. So there's an app that I'm trying to work on right now, trying to put some of these for spots so that people can kind of go on their own self-guided thing. But once we are able to do in-person guided tours, I really like doing them. It's something I love to do. We're hoping to eventually take schools and classrooms and stuff like that as well. We'd like to get eventually some other experts to kind of lead stuff. We got a lot of people have been visiting this forest for many years. There's a lot of information that people have that they can share about this place. A lot of history too. I didn't cover nearly as much of the history as I could have. But yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah. I'll mention on behalf of the events committee, we very much miss our in-person events. And yes, as soon as it's safe, we hope to get out there and many places. But you know, Henry's shown us a really fascinating and very biodiverse urban natural area, and I think it'd be great for us all when we have the chance to see it in person and learn, keep learning about it. So Henry, thank you very much for presenting this evening. Really great talk, and thank you everybody for attending. And we'll see you all at another virtual event. We're not out of this yet.
Bye everyone. Thank you.